You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And let me share some of your messages with you before we go to the Asempa Namba 24-hour economy thing. Is it boom or is it bedding? I don't know, but somehow these things are difficult to take from the politicians, that 24-hour economy. And you're not like a Singapore with some kind of, how many years of a reign. In 4 years, how are you going to be able to do that? Global Citizen says that it's not just the NDC chairman that wants them gone. We, the people of Ghana, want the EC overhauled too. Alan Ampofo says those charlatanic electoral commissioners should be removed and prosecuted. Prosecuted for what? B. Nana says the rerun is the only way out of this. After all, in 2012, MPP petitioned the Supreme Court to order the cancellation of some results and also order rerun in those polling stations. Fidel Agagle says the EC is just inconsistent. If they went to court and an order was to do collation, then why should they go back to the court? Why should they not go back to the court to seek for an order to execute a rerun? The EC didn't go to court. It was the aggrieved parties that went to court. It was the NPP and its people. Remember that actually processes were heard without the NDC. They went to Supreme Court and the Supreme Court insisted that they should be heard before they were heard. Abdul Latif Muni says they should sack them all. They are a serious dent on our democracy. Titi Abongo says that no single soul should independently take fragile decisions either based on their own whims and caprices or based on the interest of the appointing authorities. If you don't have the mental capacity to do these pertinent things, please stay home. And at Lord Kim Azim Tango, that they should be sent packing. Public office holders should at all material times reason sensibly, think of the ramifications of their actions and inactions on the entire nation. They should be people who can reason with their minds and act. And Damien XXV says, see how they made a whole constituency not to have an MP for a full term. They have got blood on their hands. Quite interesting comments there. President Mahama had a landslide victory at the last election. It is a non sequitur to assert that our president is beneficiary of EC's incompetence. Is it okay to say that I am struggling with common sense, my brother? Okay. Just a couple more. This one's from Mancha Bruce. Takra, this says, Samson, the EC shift in position appears to be a direct response to the external pressure, especially the impeachment threat. This inconsistency undermines the Commission's perceived impartiality and commitment to upholding the law. Amazing convictions. Atta says that, Atta Badu says that, you lost the elections because of Nanado. Me, Kobna, I have never voted NDC and will never do. But even if an election is run today, I won't vote again. You are doing yourself any good. You are not doing yourself any good with this posture. One seat will not change your fortunes. Be gracious, cede it, win back the base. So some advice there. Then the NPP saw nothing wrong with the EC when they override some of the administrative processes. If today the EC realized there were mistakes in the collation of the Ablekuma North parliamentary election results and wants to correct it through a rerun of 19 stations. Why are they accusing and condemning the EC for what they supported them to do all this while? Mike Kali, I think I can take a break here. Samuel Boabin says that it is truly baffling that the Electoral Commission, after firmly declaring it would not conduct elections even in the 3 disputed polling stations, has now reversed its position and decided to hold elections not only in those 3 but in an additional 16 polling stations. The real question is this: if the police were unable to provide security for the collation of the results from just 3 polling stations, how can they possibly guarantee security for elections and collation in 19? Something simply doesn't add up. Samuel Boabing in Awoshi sent in that one. Had this idea of rerun been thought about before Dr. Bosman went to Parliament? Don't you think there is disagreement among the EC, within the EC? Okay, interesting questions all coming up. Yakubu Ibn Chambers says that the establishment of the prima facie case was premised on petitions of politically tainted individuals. Okay, I think that, right, I'm sorry. That will be a message about some other issue that we are not discussing today. Thank you. Now, let's go to the government needing 541 million to be invested in what we are talking about, or what exactly is the amount they say they need. Right, they need $4 billion US, $4 billion US to run the 24-hour economy, to make it possible. In Ghana cedis, that will be 41 billion US that will be needed. 41 billion Ghana cedis. I said in Ghana cedis, 41 billion. Come on. All right. So let's hear President Mahama as he launched the blueprint for this 24-hour economy.
The finance and implementation institutional frameworks for 24-hour plus. The private sector will lead the 24-hour plus program. Government will facilitate and not dominate. Government will facilitate and not dominate. Any government funding in 24-hour plus will be catalytic, serving as seed funding for the 24-hour plus authority and supporting bulk infrastructure. Enterprise financing will be sourced through commercial banks, DFIs, and blended finance instruments. Fund 24 will address access to capital, collateral constraints, and the short-term nature of most of our banking finance. Credit guarantee schemes will support risk sharing without breaching our fiscal covenants with our multilateral institutions. And as announced, the Secretariat will evolve into an autonomous 24-hour plus authority that reports directly to the President. This policy is made for Ghana in the future. And so when I say report directly to the President, I don't mean only this President. It will report to the next President and the next President and the next President.
All right, so you've been hearing the President, John Dramani Mahama, on the 24-hour economy as the blueprint was launched. Now, some of the brains in the offices where all of this is cooked up, as in prepared, are right here in the studio to help us to understand exactly what is going on. We're also joined by Professor Godfrey Bokwing, Professor of Finance and Economist at the University of Ghana. So Abdul Nasser Alidu, Head of Strategy and Programs of the 24-Hour Plus Secretariat. Now, let's begin the conversation. My question is this a boon or a burden for this government? Will it really be able to do something substantial to realize a 24-hour economy? Is 24-hour economy a question of seeking $4 billion or 41 billion Ghana cedis, or is just a question of natural factors of, economic growth?
Okay. And I think when you lead with the question of the 4 billion, it misses the point. Because the point of this, and if you listen to what the president said when he launched it, was that there's been a lot of introspection and looking at what ails not just Ghana's economy, but a lot of African economies and a lot of economies in the developing world. And coming to the realization that the way, part of our problem has been the way our economies are structured. The problems are structural. A lot of it are legacies, from colonial times, that we haven't really taken the time to understand and change. So, for me, the point is not whether this would be a boom or a bust for the NDC, but it's an issue of what do we need? We've been going at this, development thing for how many years now? More than 60 years right now.
From Nkrumah's 7-year plan.
Exactly. We haven't made much progress, right? There needs to be a paradigm shift. There needs to be a shift in the way that we think about our development. And this blueprint provides a different way of thinking about development and ensuring that we are able to achieve the levels of job creation and prosperity for our people.
People are thinking about Ghana beyond aid. And it was Ghana not beyond IMF.
Yeah, and that's where then we need to get into the details of it, right? Because critically, the things that we realize are these. Number one was the fact that our economy was structured to be import dependent, and basically was structured as an economy that really was really meant for extraction of raw materials, extraction of resources, right? And so you realize that in terms of our exports, our top exports today are gold, oil, and cocoa, even though cocoa is dwindling. But these contribute 80% or more of our exports. We don't export a lot of value-added products. Even places like Kenya, export a lot more value-added products than we do. And we import everything else, including inputs that we use to producing the things that we even use in this country, right? And in terms of, so if you look at the data... Including Yemuadie, right? Yeah. Yemuadie is our second largest, food import.
We spend close to 3 billion Ghana cedis.
Yeah, exactly. In importing Yemuadie. We can't continue like that, right? And if you continue like that, the way this economy is structured, what you end up doing is that even in times when we think we are, and that's part of the problem, because there's been a lot of really good interventions, but because of the siloed nature, because we are not thinking about it in an integrated fashion, looking at all the different value chains that they will impact and how do we support it, we end up sometimes even causing more problems for ourselves when we are trying to do the right thing. So what we are trying to do is take a step back, understand what have we done all these years that hasn't worked. What are the lessons to learn from the different things, the Ghana Beyond Aid, 1D, 1F, all of those things. What are the lessons that we learn from it? And how do we do it differently to ensure that we actually...
Are we ever learning any lessons?
Well, hopefully this...
Even in the housing sector, everybody comes and says affordable housing. They won't finish, another one comes. Instead of completing what was left...
That's why you don't...
Instead of completing what was left, you start a new one and then start prosecuting people over the old one. And the old one is rusting, getting damaged. We don't finish it. As we speak now, there is prosecution of Collins Dada and the rest, right? Which was ongoing, which has now been terminated. I said the last time I remember, and that project was not followed through. And we're losing all the money we sunk into it. It's becoming even more expensive, to deal with it. Tell us what is going to be different. What are the lessons you have learned at the Secretariat led by Guzitano to model something that is different from all that we have seen, including the Ghana Beyond Aid?
Okay. So in terms of the way we've approached this, right, our strategy has been, one, let's identify which sectors are the prime for us to focus on. Which value chains are most important for us, right? Because you can't do everything at the same time. You talk to so many people, you come up with, but you can't do everything at the same time. And then let's identify what are the constraints within these value chains and how do we ensure we remove these value chains. The whole objective there is to ensure that we are building integrated value chains in order to, one, increase input self-reliance. Okay, we'll produce more of what we need and then be able to generate the surpluses to be able to export. We want to increase resilience so that when there are shocks within the global supply chains, we are not as significantly impacted as we are today. Today, if there's any shock within the global supply chains, Ghana is one of those that gets affected the most. That's why, for instance, in the last administration, you heard a lot about Russia, Ukraine, okay? And there were all sorts of, issues around Russia, Ukraine. We want to be able to change that. And we also want to get to the stage where we are making optimal use of the resources that are available to us, okay? So one of the things that you actually even realized, so we looked extensively at 1D1F and what worked and what didn't work. And one of the things that you realize with 1D1F, for instance, is that it was broad in the areas it had to be narrow and narrow in the areas that it had to be broad.
Explain that.
And I'll explain that. So 1D1F was essentially couched as a manufacturing intervention. So, and in that sense, it was too narrow because you can't just grow manufacturing without thinking about the full value chain. Because if you start, for instance, if you look at agro-processing, the problem with agro-processing in this country, the biggest problem with agro-processing, they'll tell you, is inputs. We don't get the raw materials that we need to be able to produce. I'm told that we get only about 30% of the raw materials that we need for agro-processing from Ghana. Okay. If you want to solve that problem, if you want to get into agro-processing and improve agro-processing, you need to look at the full value chain. You need to understand where is the primary production being done that feeds into this. How are you getting the equipment, the machinery and things that you need to be able to do that? So in that sense, 1D1F tackled the problem very narrowly, looking at just manufacturing. Now, it was broad in the area where it had to be narrow in the sense that it did not then focus on which places do we have the competitive advantage for manufacturing that we focus on. And so it was just left broadly. So anywhere you go, anything you want to do becomes part of it. That you spread yourself too thin, right? Those are some of the lessons that we've learned that you see actually getting into
But reading your document, you are simply out there to incentivize businesses to grow the economy. That's all you're going to do, and you're going to do it by, giving them some exemptions, tax exemptions, no import duty. It's the same thing, 1D1F was doing. As for electricity consumption, you said if corporate and income tax rebates, you spoke about that as well. If you are doing 2 shifts, you get 25% rebate. If you are doing 3 shifts, you get 50% rebate, and so on and so forth. What else is different?
Okay, so there are a number of things that are different in this instance. So you talk about the, I've told you one about the fact that this is, we are adopting an integrated value chain approach. We selected very specific value chains in which we need to focus in. 1D1F, you didn't have that. The other thing, you talk about incentives. We've looked at the incentive regime in this country, taking a look at all the laws and how, people, you realize that there is so much discretion that's given to the bureaucracy. Too much discretion to exercise. So you can be doing the same thing. I could be doing the same thing as Prof. I'll get all the tax incentives and Prof will not get anything just because I know somebody and he doesn't know someone. So if you look at part of what we are proposing is that incentives should not be, left to discretion of bureaucrats or politicians. Incentives should be based on performance and based on what it is, what are the priorities of the government. Okay, so what is the country's priorities and how do you do it? So that's one of the very, and this is significant.
So if it will not be left to politicians or bureaucrats, as you said, who is going to be making this decision so that there will not be the discrimination you speak about?
There needs to be clarity. So for instance, if we've identified oil palm as a strategic value chain that we want to develop, and we say if you are bringing in equipment that is related to oil palm, you get incentives. This should be clearly spelled out so that if I get to Tema and I'm bringing something that impacts on the oil palm value chain, the guy at the port should be able to make that decision and move. I don't need to now apply to the minister for the minister to provide the exemptions and then it goes to the GRA commissioner for the GRA commissioner to do this. I don't need to do all of that. Okay, so that's part of what, so when you say it needs to be very clear, and I need to know that I'm getting this even before I come in. Because in today's regime, you don't know what you're getting until you come in. You come in, you write a letter and hope that it is approved before you get in. Those are some of the things that...
Some of the processes of the exemptions are actually unconstitutional, we contend. And I have been in court, in the Supreme Court,
that's good,
leading 3 MPs
that's great,
challenge the manner in which the 1D, 1F, exemptions were being dished out.
So
it's the problem you have actually mentioned.
Exactly.
Because eventually we are sort of channeling money to party people and not really interested in building, companies that will last and provide the jobs.
Exactly. So that's part of what we are. The other thing that we are doing that's very significant, and I'm sure is the Volta Economic Corridor that we are looking at. And this is a vast resource that we haven't taken much advantage of. Now, when you look at it, and when I started, I was talking about the fact that much of our problems and much of what we are doing today is steeped in the thinking from colonial days. Okay. For example, if you think of agric, for instance, almost every person you meet today who is into agric is looking at exports, not looking at feeding the country. But you need to first achieve food sovereignty, food sustainability before you even think about exporting what you have. So you go into the, how do you call it? We're having some conversations with the rubber industry recently, and rubber manufacturers in this country cannot get the rubber to process, and yet we are exporting the rubber. That's what actually led to the TCDA sending out the directive that we need to satisfy local, demand before we actually think about export. Within the Volta economy, so that's one of the colonial thinking. The other problem also has been, if you look at the development of infrastructure in this country, you realize much infrastructure is developed on the western side. So, most of the railways and the roads are more on the western side, because that's where a lot of the resources were. So if you think about the bauxite, the gold and everything, it was either inland or to the west. And that's why you see all of this built over there. You don't see a lot of that in the eastern side of the country. And then we had this Akosombo Dam and this huge river, this huge lake, got created. The lake is, pardon? But that's what I said.
You said huge lake God created.
No, got created.
Oh, sorry. Then I heard you. I just needed to correct that for the record's sake. Maybe other people heard so.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
I didn't say God created it. Yeah, it's the biggest man-made lake in the world.
Thank you. That's what I mean.
That's it. And you have so much land over it. We've visited it. We've traversed. And when you realize the place is, in terms of population density, very low population density. Much of the agriculture you see there is actually not irrigated agriculture, but they are right by the lake and they are farming, and it's all based on rain. When you have that water running over. And you ask yourself, why are we not developing this place? The response that you get is that, well, to develop it, it's too expensive to build the roads to access those places. And so we focus on developing the parts where the roads are already built rather than, focus on building the place where the roads are not. And that's a fair concern, because I actually, in looking at this, we reviewed one project that was done in the Afram Plains area. And almost 50% of the costs was actually the construction of the road. Okay. So it's expensive to build roads, but you have the river there, and the river can be the road. So the concept here is let's rethink the way we think about development around that area. Let's think about the river as the road. If you think of the river as the road, then you can open up the place. You can build the agroecological parks, which depend on the water for irrigation. So you are no more farming once a year, you are farming twice a year or 3 times a year in sometimes. And then build the factories that support basically agro-processing and taking it.
Okay.
It's not the same thing as 1D, 1F. So we can talk about it.
Yeah, so you hold on now. I wanted you to open, and then my other guests will come in, and you will have the opportunity to make corrections or interventions as may be necessary. You are talking about targeted VAT exemptions, time of use of electricity tariffs. You are talking about export value rebate for exporters. You're going to get state institutions to prioritize local goods, pop-up stores and regular trade expos, fast-track utilities and regulatory clearances. You are also looking at what you call the agroecological parks along the Volta Basin. You just mentioned part of that. Urban farming clusters, Volta Lake irrigation, you spent some time on that. Volta Lake transport system, you just spent some time on that. You have nationwide industrial parks, 50 plus acres per park, dedicated power grid, embedded policies and fire service, located near agro ecological zones, etc., and 4 billion. Once again, I go to the figure because we always ask where are you going to get the money from? When Akufo-Addo as candidate before he became president, started with Stephen Saka on Hard Talk and spoke about free SHS. The first question was, how are you going to pay for it? He fumbled, came to Ghana. You guys put a few things together before we said, Jack, it was a free SHS. Imani told you, you are not doing it the way it should be done. You won't listen. Then later, eventually, little by little, this is where we are. So, I hear from Prof. before I get to my other guest. Yes, Prof, what do you make of this 24-hour economy?
Morning to our cherished listeners. So finally, the document is here. Let me say, some of us got it ahead way back and all of that. So I will situate my position this way because I've looked at the document from the beginning to the end. I've also looked at it in relation to Ghana Beyond Aid. I've looked at it in relation to the coordinated program of social and economic policy from 2017. It was actually supposed to have ended in 2024, but because of COVID, we extended 2025 and all of that. And more importantly, I've looked at this document in relation to the IMF-supported program. And the reason I did all of this is to understand why there is lack of policy continuity with our own programs. Meanwhile, IMF will give us a program. Start with one administration. Another administration comes, they continue. Incentives, all of that play a role. So I'll look at it this way. From conceptualization, diagnosis, there isn't much difference in this document and Ghana Beyond Aid. And then the coordinated program of social and economic development, all of that, there isn't much difference. When I say there isn't much difference, it's not like work hasn't gone into this. Is the issues which have been diagnosed. Under the NPP, they said they were going to change the Gorgisbeck economy. What was the Gorgisbeck economy? It was essentially moving the economy from being dependent on primary commodities to more value added and the rest of them. And in fact, and if you read the document and you read the Ghana Beyond Aid and all the others, you can see that we all have that broader consensus that we need to do something about.
For example, we have always known we need some agricultural revolution.
Precisely.
So nothing new, really.
Yes, from social studies.
Yeah.
Social
Way back.
Yeah.
Way back.
JHS.
You see why some lecturers don't revise their notes. Please forgive me. If the things we told them to do in the 70s, they haven't done it. Maybe we should repeat it in 2024 or something. But
Social studies, when you are asked why Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's state-owned enterprises collapsed, the same issues that made it collapse, they are the same issues that confront us today.
Right.
So nothing is changing.
Right.
So something from that perspective, the diagnosis is right, and I think a lot of work has gone into that in terms of changing the structure of the economy. I mean, in the 60s, almost 80% of our export earnings driven by primary commodities. When we say we have done well as a country, it's more of the same. We have added oil and gas, but it's still primary commodities and all of that. So all successful governments have made the attempt to do something about this and all of that. So from that perspective, I would say fine. In fact, something, if you take time to read the Ghana Beyond Aid and you read this, you will see great similarity.
And 1D1F.
You will see great similarity. Look, they call it now, with the Christian, it Grow 24. Grow 24. In fact, under the Ghana Beyond Aid, they call it Wiser Ghana. 5 pillars. Wealthy Ghana, inclusive Ghana, sustainable Ghana, empowered Ghana, resilient Ghana, and all of that. When you look at the framework from that perspective, then there are the strategies to deliver this. Call them economic development instruments. Then they talked about 1D, 1F. So it's not just in isolation. In fact, there's a whole linkages identified in there. And we have looked at the government economic development instrument, not just 1D, 1F. The economic development instrument the NPP government implemented from 2017 to 2024. If you look at this, straddled across fiscal, monetary, and specific interventions, which include 1D, 1F, planting for food and jobs, and the linkages and all of that. In fact, why it didn't work, we can understand that. But of course, let me say this. Some progress was made under these interventions. And where I think that this document should make reference and demonstrate how we are building on some of these things. It helps in taking the politics out of it, rather than developing this as though it's just
a new document.
A new document and all of that. We need to demonstrate succession. We need to demonstrate progressivity,
sustainability,
and continuity. And why this is important is that given that it doesn't lie entirely within the government to implement this.
That's right.
Because the financing is not going to come from you. You want to develop it in such a way that there's some kind of continuity. So, for instance, some businesses benefited under the 1D, 1F. How do they feed into this? And all of that. So those are the things that I think we need to look at. So it's a great document. A lot of thought has gone into it, but there's a lot more we have to do. Something, if you read the NDC's manifesto, the Ghana Beyond Aid is packaged as the overriding, more like the overriding framework.
The MPP manifesto.
No,
I think the concept.
NDC, the concept.
That's right.
So everything else draws from that. Everything else draws from that. So, but if you read the document, it's much more narrow. In fact, and here I will link that to Ghana Beyond Aid. Ghana Beyond Aid, they had determined that by a certain date, our GDP per capita will grow up to a certain point. They had even determined that in order to reach that point, we needed to grow our economy on the average by 9.5% and all of that. You see, consistently, because you see, you need to have that. Then the next important question you do is, what do we need to put in place to grow at this level? I know that this whole thing is about job bridge. I've seen targeting about 1.7 million jobs and all of that and all of this. But this is how I think we can go about it. But something, let's look at it this way. So strategy, the pathways to implement this, or the economic development instrument, I agree. The difference also here is that there's a bit more focus on big scale intervention in terms of using the voter league. And I think a lot of work has been done in the time past about the economic potential of the voter league. So it's good that they are making use of that. And I think that is very good. The other thing I want to talk about is implementation. Something. You know that we have successfully implemented 17 IMF-supported programs. In fact, on the IMF website, they tell us that we have been there 18 times, and we are saying 17. We will not go into why 18 and all of that. In all of this, something, we have never created a secretariat for IMF-supported program in this country. You know why that is important? And if you look at the implementation strategy here, I have serious reservations. We don't need to create an authority after for Ghana beyond, for 24-hour economy. Look, something. Since 1992, if you look at development policies and how we seek to implement it, we take it away from the existing structures within which the development channels must flow. And that is where the politics become typified.
Special assistance.
Okay. Pick National Health Insurance Authority, right? Something. From the time it was set up to date, approximately 44% of the total allocation to them is spent on administration. How do you pay claims promptly? Look at Cocoa Board. It's possible that Cocoa Board has more V8 than cocoa beans. Okay? And the rest of them. So the administrative cost of implementing some of these things becomes huge. We don't need to even create a separate unit within Ghana Police Service for 24 hours. It's supposed to be a mindset. This is government program. Everybody works with it. Okay? So look at IMF supported program. We don't have a secretariat here to implement it. IMF has an office here. It's not an implementing office. And yet, we start the program. I hope you understand that a different regime comes because they are using the systems. So if I read a document and say that there will be a secretary that will collect data, this, what is Ghana Statistical Service doing? Okay, so how do we infuse this within our, we have a decentralized local government system, development pathways, and all that. Let's do that. That way, we will minimize the cost of implementing this intervention. So I said that you see there's been a lot of about whether the policy eventually is here. There a lot of thinking has gone into it, but I'm saying that we can make it work better. And all that way, once we infuse it within the existing systems, ministries, department, agencies, they are all running with it. Even if there's a change in government, it will not necessarily dislocate the pathway and the rest. Otherwise, you create, for instance, the same thing we did for 1D, 1F, and the rest of them. So once there's a change in government, what happens? All those people will go. We created Southern Development Authority. We created this authority, created this. All of that, they are cost centers, budgetary allocations. What is the value? The taxpayer is burdened. And all of that. So let's look at it. Then the other thing I want to talk about is this. If I pick this document, what are the key performance indicators? How is that linked to the critical success factors within all of this? In fact, something 6 months from now, if we want to know the progress government is making on this, how are we going to tell? And that is why IMF programs work effectively. And I would advise, that's why in looking at this document, I looked at it side by side, other document that we have had, and I also looked at it side by side with the IMF supported program. Look, there's a phasing, a regular review, and that is why it compels government to work with it, because July 7th or so, the IMF Executive Board will meet on our program. That's a review. When they are done, they will give us their review. Everybody will read it. Stakeholders. So this one, what is the phasing? And once you do the phasing, it will compel you to develop projections.
Right.
So I see that maybe 2028, they are talking about target, but 6 months from now, how do we break them down into objective targets and the KPIs and the data we need to generate?
What's your verdict or hope in the promise of this document, this policy?
Look, there's potential in this document. Just as you see, look, Ghana's development is in our literature. The document, when you read it, you will smile for Ghana.
Just as the laws that we pass.
We can write.
Okay, but the issue is how do we move this from good intentions into implementation and the rest of them? And here I'll say the costing hasn't been done properly. In fact, you need more than $4 billion unless The $4 billion is the administrative cost and the rest of them. Because one channel which they want to bring this 24-hour economy into fruition is the big push. The big push itself in their manifesto, they've indicated they need $10 billion.
That's correct.
To bring it. So that's just one part. Because without infrastructure, and I like the diagnosis, the work that the team has done in terms of the contribution of logistics to prices. Okay, we are doing close to 35, 40%.
60%.
Yes, and the rest of them. So
if a company, a private entity is going to employ, 3 people for one job or 2 people for one particular role in a company, does it take this incentive, giving them lower electricity tariffs?
They will wait. You look at it and say it's cost benefit. To have somebody on your payroll, there has to be a reason beyond just incentives.
That reason is?
Okay, so the reason is, you see,
market driven.
Yes, market driven. And there's a dominant school of thought that says that you need to create a certain enabling environment, broad base. Okay, that is more effective than maybe creating a delimited this thing and say incentive and all of that, because the frictions in the economy would outweigh whatever incentive they want to get from.
I had a senior police officer talk about is it a 24-hour something secretariat at the police headquarters?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier, that we don't need to go that
24-hour security. I was like, look, what's he talking about?
And
has security ever been less than 24 hours? Mm-hmm. So what is the point?
And why should that be done for those who work the last shift? Those who work the first shift, they need protection to sleep soundly, as much as those who go the last shift and all of that. So that's what I'm saying. When we go this way, then anytime there's a change in government, we have to disband and all of that. That's how we make the politics look so distant.
Somebody said they went to the DVLA, which has created a 24-hour service. And they went there, they were told that they couldn't process something because of either internet or something of the sort in the night.
So that's what I'm saying. So I believe that the government is going to do that. And that is why in terms of the pathways, road, infrastructure, logistics, they've talked about all of them. Of course, the integrated and the leakages looks very beautiful, okay, on the document, all of that. But implementation, the question is, 4 billion, certainly not adequate. Where is it going to come from? And something more recently, when COVID came, we had Ghana Care, Obatampa, PCPEC, and the rest of them. They said 100 billion. And then they said the 100 billion, 70% was going to come for private sector. Look, before private sector will put their money there and all of that. So that's what I'm saying, that to the extent that its implementation does not depend totally on government, then we want to be able to, I believe that is a good starting point. We need to, we'll freshen it up and all of that and see how.
So we'll get to him to explain later what they mean by that. 4 billion, 41 billion in Ghana cedis. We understand there will be $300 million from governments. And that's supposed to represent 7%. There will be PPPs via the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Criminal courts. Okay, SkyTrain, eh? Is that the place? Then there is $148 million of 2025 District Assembly's Common Fund for 24-hour markets. I'm asking, I was going through and asking myself, so why are you creating this market? Do they need, a night market, so to speak? Is that what you want to do?
Excessive branding.
Or we will just do some things to show at elections that we have done something. Kofi, let me come to you before. Because I'm reading about how many chip compounds that are going to be built. And I'm like, okay, so you may not like Akufo-Addo. You may not like his government. They've done bad things. But they started a project, a hospitals project. Can't we look at that, finish them up, rather than these chip compounds everywhere again, so that you can say, beat your chest at elections and say, we did this number of chip compounds?
That's our problem.
Yes.
Right? Our governments think that they need to come in and say big, lofty things. And from Free SH's time, when we started, being very forceful about what has been said in the manifesto, we said something. We said that, look, when they say it on a political platform, they don't really say it after the thinking. They say it because the moment requires them to say something bombastic. But after they say it and it catches, then they are forced to implement it. Then when they realize that they will have to implement this, otherwise they'll be held to it, then they create something to represent what they've said. Then you end up with a document like this. And Prof. Bokpin is a fellow in Imani. We have had some discussions, but we have not actually analyzed this as Imani. I'm saying this because he said half of the things I wanted to say. And if we had met and said something about it, it would have come up officially there, but that's half. When you process development this way, you end up with a lot of branding, with a lot of glossy magazines, and then by the time you finish, nothing is achieved. However, there's a curious feature of all of them, NDC, NPP. They access the funds and they spend those funds. We run, and by the way, please let me make this clear. I am not against the 24-hour thing. Sometimes we will sound critical and look, governance is hard. We live in a country which is not developed and unreasonably so. So every government must do something, be seen to be moving, and this is not a bad thing.
Yes.
What we are trying to say is that this is more of the same. And what we are trying to point out is, let me start this way. If it goes the way they've represented it in the glossy magazine 24-hour, we'll end up achieving less than 30%. Let me tell you what we are going to do. We run something called the Excuse Republic. We have already given the excuse for our underdevelopment. It's in the document. And that's what we say we all learn in primary school. Because of import, we import more than... That's the excuse, republic. Okay? And when we create the excuse for the... we give the excuses for the underdevelopment, then we give excuses for fanciful ideas. Because we are not importing, we'll do import substitution. And we'll build factories, and we'll do this. 1D, 1F, many of the things said there are here. And if you trace it backwards, like Prof said, you see them there. So excuse for fanciful ideas, which we don't achieve. And then we make excuses for waste and stealing. That's the 4 billion you are hearing. Any analyst will tell you that if you look at some of the things that they've talked about, 4 billion is not going to cut it at all.
They're looking to start with a pilot with 50, firms.
That's always what happens. We are going to do a pilot. We are going to, that's what I'm saying. That's the excuse for waste and stealing. So they will access $300 million or so, okay? They will did you see people go and dig dugouts and call them dams under 1D, 1F? That's the excuse for waste and stealing. And then we end up having proofs about them. Then we always do something. We create excuses for building institutions and passing new laws. You hear they are going to set up an authority.
Yeah, 24-hour economic authority.
I also
don't do it. You don't need an... Look, my brother here was asking them in Parliament, where are the legal framework, whatever it is. We have enough laws in this country to deal with everything that we want to do without setting up new laws. Every time we just set up institutions, you know what? Ghana has a large government.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about from district level to regional level.
And the cost is huge.
And it's extra. They suck up 80% of all the revenue we make. And they're supposed to be taking care of me. I'm telling you, more than 50% of the citizens in Ghana live and do not detect much government intervention in their daily lives. Yes. And there are people outside Accra who the government doesn't know from birth to death. So don't build new authorities, then new offices, new furniture from China.
I thought, Kofi, that the IMF program included and compelled us to free setting up new institutions. So Akufo-Addo's government began, if you had a legislation you wanted to promote, and it meant that you have to set up another commission authority, they didn't take it.
IMF, we call them adult supervision.
Yes.
Okay, they come, they do the things we must do, which we know how to do. As long as they are providing the adult supervision and keeping their thumbs on us, we do all of them. We always pass. We get out with flying colors. But you know what we do? They create parallel systems that bypass the IMF. And in fact, at a point, even after HIPIC, when we used to be going for those things, they come with conditionalities forcing us to do, that's the adult supervision. We said we won't go there again. We went to the international markets, borrowed 30 billion plus, and we ended up in trouble. So we create parallel systems that bypass the IMF. It's exactly what I'm saying here right now. Now look, we've been doing the same things and then when we finish, we end up having probes because all those pilots and things spend the money, we don't see anything happen, and then we make excuses for why these things did not happen. Okay, look, why are we not going to, for instance, pick up 1D1F, okay, and try and make it work? It's a good thing to build down.
Because we have reportedly spent 541 million in that, affecting about 169 enterprises. And all these enterprises, almost all of them are struggling.
Yes. So, and that's government money.
And they are asking, how do they fit into this?
How?
What next from here?
Why? Why are we not going to pick them up and connect them? All right? And let me say something. We don't have time to go through this, but I'm just going to make broad points. Back in 2010, okay, we came up with Atimani, it was a rubric. And in development policy, we have showstoppers and facilitators. Showstoppers, and I'm using the ordinary term, when we are talking consulting, we use different terms, but for the public, showstoppers are things that if you don't have, nothing will happen. All right? If they are not there, forget it. Nothing will happen. And then we have facilitators. If you don't have them, something can happen, but if they are present, things will be fast. Okay? Showstoppers. If you don't have water, all right, nothing will happen. All industries need water. If you don't have energy, nothing will happen. If you don't have good roads and telecommunications, nothing will happen. If you take health, health is crucial, but health is a facilitator. Okay, there are people in the rural areas that never go to.
Are you saying take care of these?
Can I
take care of these?
Wait.
Take care of these, and a 24-hour economy
will take care of itself.
Will take care of itself.
But let me wrap up on that.
Will spring up automatically.
Let me wrap up on that. See, again, that's why I said there's no time. You are talking about 6 billion. Okay, I can tell you because we did this work when Aqua Vitens Rand came here. Okay, and what we found out at that time was that we needed $2 billion plus 4 years to provide water to all the spaces and homes within Accra and Tema. Listen, $2 billion, and if you had all that $2 billion today, you need 4 years to do that because what? You dig trenches, lay pipes, that kind of thing. What I'm saying is this. If you take water, if you take roads, rail, and if you take energy alone, you will need more than 6 billion.
Right.
All right? If you take construction, today, go to East Legon, go to West Legon, and I'm using them because they are supposed to be the higher places. If you leave the main road, the road right next to it is a dirt road.
That's right.
Okay, so if you go, the roads that lead to, go to industrial area today. Go to Tema, the places where we are doing the production.
Yes.
Where you are taking the roads are not good.
Right.
But here's the thing. Let me finish, please. I mean, take the 6 billion, okay? Take wait. I know you are going to say it's there, but I beg.
No, it's not that it's there. None of this is tackling the issues.
Let me finish.
All right.
Take the 6 billion. Give yourself, say we are going to do roads, we are going to do water, and we are going to strengthen our energy so that every rain doesn't lead to light off.
Thank you.
That alone for the 4 years will help us.
Yes,
the rest will take care of it.
And you don't need to set up an authority.
You don't need to set up an authority to do that. You don't need new laws.
So let me say this. One, 24-hour economy cannot be a substantive policy. It is rather an effect of a substantive policy.
Of good policy.
And so if somebody produces a document and call it a 24-hour economy, it's problematic.
But somebody can have Ghana Beyond Aid as a
Ghana
policy.
Beyond Aid with substantive policies, which would eventually have the effect of a 24-hour economy. If you go to Broadway or Times Square in New York, nobody tells a shop owner there to open his shop at 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m. They do it because they have customers. If you go to Dubai, nobody tells a shop to operate at 1 a.m. They do it because they have customers, people patronizing. And so 24-hour economy cannot be a substantive policy. It is quite problematic when you set off that I want to operate a 24-hour economy with the view to turning our economy around. Because in economics, It is simply demand and supply. And so 24-hour economy can only be an effect and not a substantive policy. Let me move on, my brother. You see, there ought to be continuity. We are wasting the taxpayers' money. If it was our own business that we're running as politicians, is this how we're going to run it? When you come into office, you've seen Ghana Beyond Aid. Already taxpayers' money have been expended. And you see, you are jumping to go and create a new one, right? And that new one, the fulcrum of it, the philosophy is that if you operate 24 hours, I'll give you certain incentives. And so if I open Joy FM, until Joy FM and other media houses started, there was GBC. You and I know that GBC will start at 5 p.m. And
5 a.m.
No, 5 p.m.
Okay.
They used to start at 5 p.m. and close at 12 midnight.
They start in the morning and close, and then they later start in the evening. Yeah.
But they run 24 hours because there's the market. There's competition. If they don't keep it, people will not come there again. They will move elsewhere. So there's a problem. Samson, you don't have time, but let me hit it this way.
They want to induce the market.
No, you can't do that. There's first demand and there's supply. You can't put the cart before the horse. We have one problem. Our problem is that, Samson, let's do two things. One, government should use its budget. Government should use its budget to instigate economic growth in Ghana through patronizing made in Ghana products. If there is anything that you want to procure, unless it is not in Ghana, then you can procure from outside. But procure it from here. Two is this. Let's amend our Procurement Act to ensure competitive, genuine competitive bidding. That is the way to...
We don't need to amend the...
Well,
it's already there.
Delete the sole sources from there.
Which has become the norm.
Which has become the norm.
The loophole has become the norm.
Let's
No, even the conditions for sole sourcing, if we follow it, there's
So
nothing
delete.
wrong. You don't need to delete it.
Well, Samson, thank you very much. Thank you very much. But I'm looking at the time constraints for procurement.
Okay.
Given the tenure of office, given the tenure of office of a government,
I was thinking
look, we don't have time. We can have a whole period to discuss.
You have a whole one on this.
But I'm saying that if you look at the time constraints, right, in terms of our procurement, even sole sourcing, the minimum time frame turnaround is about 3 to 6 months. Competitive tender, you are looking at in excess of 12 months. These are the challenges, right? And when you fix this in the tenure of office of a government, then you have a problem. And so we have to begin to think through our Procurement Act in that circumstance. But I'm saying that once we have a genuine competitive procurement system, it will unleash the talent of Ghanaians to do very well in the private sector. Once that is done, nobody needs to go for a document called 24-hour economy or Ghana Beyond Aid. Government can actually invest its resources in creating the enabling environment for businesses to thrive. That is all businesses need.
It's 24-hour economy
So
and accelerated
Can I
export.
just-
Hold on. Vera will make a brief comment from the policy standpoint, briefly. Then you will finish with us. Hello, Vera. Vera. Okay. So you, yes, let's they raise issues.
They've raised a lot of
issues.
yes,
Almost all of them.
Yes.
Yes, what do you say?
I mean, first of all, what I'll say is, just to start off, let's take the cynicism out of the conversation. Because a lot of times I see a lot of cynicism.
We all said good idea.
So let's no, but the reason why I say that is that there's a lot that I'm also hearing that seems to suggest that you haven't necessarily read all the books. So for instance, what he was talking about, the procurement and all of that, that's completely covered in the book. If you go to Go 24, that's part of what it actually does. So if you went there, you would see it and you wouldn't have to say it over here.
Speak to it.
No, I mean, he's talked about, he said exactly what is in there. I take the point that Prof raised, which is the fact that it it would be good to acknowledge all the, the documents and all the lessons that have been learned
and the progress we've
and the
made
progress
and how
that we've
this
made.
builds.
And I take that point, and I think it's important as a country we learn to acknowledge, what has been done and what we are building on. And yes, there's a lot that we are building on, but there's a lot also that is different. You asked, for instance, what is the difference between this and 1D, 1F? Even the way money.
I thought you had done that already. You had done the distinguishing, talking about where it was narrow, where it was supposed to be broad.
I want to give a very specific example.
Okay.
The way you take money, you get money because when you think about financing businesses, there's an infrastructure bit which we've thought about. How do you get the bulk infrastructure in there? And that's where GIF comes in and all of that. Part of the problem, with businesses, a lot of these businesses was the fact that they had to also build the infrastructure that they need. Then you have the enterprise financing. Under 1D, 1F, essentially what government did was to subsidize loans, right, for the businesses. What we are doing is to identify what are the constraints, what makes loans expensive, what accounts for the the short tenor of loans, what accounts for the fact that the lending is highly collateralized in Ghana, and then put in place structures that ensures that you take away these constraints so you don't have to subsidize it, but you reduce the cost of lending. That's what we do.
About Ghana Development Bank?
I'm working. Yes, of course, I know Ghana Development Bank.
Okay, what I'm saying is that we have done that already.
No, we haven't done that. You haven't done that.
Hold on. So
what have we done?
Today, as we speak, they are under probe in their criminal situations. But we've written about it at the money.
I know. Yes.
Okay? All right. Now, why are you reinventing that wheel?
Nobody is reinventing that. That's why I'm saying you have not read the book. If you read the book, please put the funding this on it. If you read the book, you realize. No, you haven't read it. If you read it, you realize. I
haven't read it.
Let me just show you. Let me show you this. I just need to show you.
No, you are not getting me.
No, I am getting you.
We have all read it, but
no,
we
you haven't. You haven't.
So what you are proposing today?
Wait. No, you have not.
Yes.
Let me show you. You have not.
Okay. What's the point?
You have not. In the point that if you look at the way the money gets to businesses, DBG is right in the center there. We've spoken to DBG. We've had extensive discussions with DBG and figured out how do we ensure that we implement all the things that they need to do, and also actually even add some things to it to ensure that money gets to the beneficiaries. Now you tell me here that do you know DBG? As if we've not talked about DBG.
You said we should take out the cynicism, but
yes.
You didn't even finish hearing me.
No, I heard you. You said, do you know DBG?
Bro, we are not arguing.
I think the point is making that this kind of analysis informed also the certain.
Exactly.
You don't do that. The DBG we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars. It's suffering today different problems, which if you don't solve, cannot do these things you are talking about.
No, but you see, you don't start that with, do you know DBG?
No, you see,
of course.
Again,
I will not be sitting here discussing this if I don't know DBG.
So you put money in, in a development bank.
So but let's move on.
Then you dish it out for who to go and do.
That problem.
50 companies.
No, relax. But we can talk about the substantive things. And we've done a lot of thinking. What I'm saying is that you don't get up, you don't start up by saying, do you know DBG?
What are you doing
but
big promise?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, gentlemen. I'm sorry, but our time is up. Unfortunately, our time is up. Gentlemen. Sorry, Kofi. Sorry, our time is up. And this show is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. And my outfit that you have been talking about, gentlemen. Sorry. And my outfit that you have been talking about is by Kunati Clothing. 0244-676732 0244-676732. Just call them and you will get a nicely done outfit for you. It's also brought to you by MTN. Everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. DBS Industries, roofing. Papa Fie, My Way Insurance. Dial *165# on MTN to join My Way today. Flamingo Paints, simply superior. Syntex Tanks is strong as tough. And Activa Insurance, they are proud to be associated with your number one show, Newsfile. Now, my guests have been Vera Abena-Addo of the CDD. Unfortunately, we couldn't connect with her for the last topic. Kofi Bento, and Abdul Nasser Alidu, Head of Strategy and Programs at the 24-Hour Plus Secretariat, Nana Ejay Bafo Ewa MP Nshire so South, Menshia South. Yes, the guy will come and hit me. Of course, Professor Bokwing. He is a professor of finance and economist at the University of Ghana. Have a good afternoon. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini.